Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is an honor to have this author, financial guru, and coach, someone that really understands what it takes to give and be generous with what God gives you and to get to that point the right way. So, Bob Lotich, welcome to the God and Gig Show. Welcome. How are you?
Yeah, Ellen, it's an honor to be here. I'm excited to chat. Yeah, excited to see where the conversation goes.
Well, I hope it goes to a place where I can learn how I can give away $1 million by age 40. Unfortunately, that's 8 years too late, but
Yep.
I have to catch up. But you have an amazing story. Again, you've already probably talked to thousands of people about finances. You've given your testimony many times. But I always like to start with a question that kind of like throws, everybody brings everybody back to kind of like that level. Like,
hmm
where has been the biggest surprise, I guess, if I had to ask you something like right off the top? Like, you're sitting here now, you're talking to me. What is still surprising you at this stage that you've made it? And then we'll walk all the way back to how you got it here. But what is still shocking you at this moment that you're sitting here right now talking about this topic with me?
Uh, I think the surprise is it always looks different than what you think it would look. I think that's one of the things that I've observed. And so I just kind of thought that I don't know what I thought, but like walking with God, there's always surprises. There's always new things. There's always turns in the road where it's like, oh wow, I didn't see that coming. That wasn't the way I planned it. That wasn't, and it's always better. Like God
Mm,
always has things sitting hidden for you, that are just better than you expected. And oftentimes you get there in a way that isn't how you expected. It's never this like linear path, and I think that that's the biggest thing, like kind of summing it up of what is a surprise to me at this point.
thanks. Yeah, and I wanted to start there because again, like I feel like sometimes when I talk to people like you that are accomplished already, I feel like, oh, you've made it. There's nothing else that's yep, I know how to just roll it along with the punches and everything is easy now and good now. And I'd like to remind every viewer and every listener that you're still on a journey, that your journey
Oh
hasn't
my
ended.
gosh.
So when you start to tell the story and they start to hear like, oh, well, if he did A, B, and C, then it must have been like lined up, like you said, linearly. And it's nothing linear even at the stage you're at now. But for those who are meeting you for the first time, let's just walk them back. Can you give them kind of like that 30-second elevator pitch? They missed the show notes, they didn't read the bio. Can you just tell them a little bit, if you had to summarize people meeting you for the first time, what you do and what you're all about?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm an author, podcaster, blogger. I started blogging in 2007. And in most of what I talk to people about is money and kind of the intersection of our faith and how those dots connect. And so a lot of times people describe me like somewhere combination of you take Dave Ramsey and Tim Ferriss and maybe Chip and Joanna Gaines and like roll them all up in one ball. And that's kind of my wife and I and what we're doing. But yeah, that's kind of us.
Okay, so number one, those are three names that I could probably never imagine in the same place being in the same person because they have such varying
Very, very
personalities
different, right?
and
Yeah.
and it's amazing. I think that really is a clear indication that you had to create a unique path for yourself, even in a very crowded space. And as I mentioned before when we are talking, that this is a creatives, artist, very centric in terms of the creative space, but also faith space. And so we know we serve a creative God. And so he's got an individual path for each one of us, but yours was a very unique path, even though you deal with something that all of us deal with, which is money. So I guess I do need to let people know you have this unique story of, like many of us, coming out of, I guess, would it be college or coming into your 20s? And what was your first inkling that money was either going to be something you would have to tackle or have to struggle with? Was it like, what was that first hit that money was going to be? Ooh, this is something that's going to be a major.
Yeah. Well, I think it started for me. So yeah, I'll take you back to the story. So I was 20 years old. It was the day before my 21st birthday. I was living down in a Florida town. I know you're down in Florida. And so I was actually in the Sarasota area down there. And God had kind of called me away to like an extended sabbatical. And And so I was down there, I mean, 1,000 miles from home, didn't know anybody. And I was having, kind of living like the Instagrammer's dream, because I was living in this beach town. I had a convertible. It was Friday. It was payday. I just got my paycheck. My friends were coming down the next day to celebrate my 21st birthday. Like, from the outside looking in, everything was going great. But as I had just picked up my paycheck and was on my way to the bank to cash it, because my rent was due that day, as I'm driving there, my car breaks down like in the middle of the road, like quicker, so fast I couldn't even pull over to the side of the road. And there was a baseball game going on right next to me, a minor league baseball game. So there's tons of cars, everybody's staring, like gawking through the window. And I keep turning the key, trying to get the car to start. It's like it's not working. And as I'm sitting there, like it starts dawning on me, like I'm in trouble here, because like I'm like, how am I going to get this car towed and then fixed and then back to the bank and to get my check cashed to go pay my rent that's due in 3 hours? And like, I'm starting to figure all this out, and I'm like, if I don't get that rent paid in 3 hours, then she's going to tack on a $50 late fee, and I don't have the $50 because my paycheck was just enough to cover the rent. And I mean, I just had a mess brewing. And not to mention, it's like, I got to pick up my friends from the airport tomorrow morning, and like all these different things are going on. I wasn't even thinking like months down the road to see where this was going. I was just a mess financially. And I remember as like this house of cards starts tumbling down, and I'm seeing like all the vulnerabilities and frailties of my money management at that point. I remember like grabbing that steering wheel and just like having my freak out moment, and like tears in my eyes, like, God, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm a complete mess. I need help. And it was the first time in my life that I invited God into my financial situation. And one of the best things I ever did for my finances.
And I can attest to how many cars I can imagine, not just one, at least 3 or 4 times of the car not starting. I've got one in the shop right now. And realizing my story quickly, again, it's not about me, but I just love the fact that you equated it to that moment that you gave God control of your finances. Mine was my wife and I both having 2 used cars, both of them breaking down at the same time, and then realizing we did not have enough money to go get a rental. And then at that same moment, or the same day after we prayed, like, okay, Lord, we don't know, we can't get to work, can't get anywhere, getting a check from, at the time I was playing, I was a musician at my church, and getting a envelope with a card saying, thank you for being our minister of music, with the exact amount of money we needed to get the rental. I mean, it was like God is like, okay, you should have done better than this, but I will never leave you hanging. Right? I'm going to give you what you need. But clearly, that was a life starter for you, where now it must have lit a fire in you to not be in that position again, where God was taking control of your finances. But I got to ask for all of us that are in that position, right? We're all in the paycheck to paycheck or whatever it is, as side hustle, 9 to 5, whatever that income source is. We usually see it as not enough. Like, let's just be honest. And I'm sure you know that as a financial planner. So what were the steps you took to get from, oh my God, I have nothing, I can't make it, if this happens, if this emergency hits me, I have nothing, to the point where you at least had traction? I think that's one of the first steps, right? Not just getting to the goal of financial independence, but just getting traction and getting ahead of the game where you feel like you're in control. So what did you do?
Yeah. So there's 2 different things I've observed, because I've been talking to Christians about money for like 15 years now. Like, this has been, so I have the unique opportunity to be able to see how a lot of different denominations and a lot of Christians across, the whole board handle their money. And I've observed something really interesting. You have a large percentage of the church that will do the common sense stuff that they know they should do. It's like, all right, well, I know I shouldn't be in debt, so I probably shouldn't spend more than I earn each month. Or I am in debt, so maybe I'll work on putting some of my disposable income towards those credit cards and paying them off. Okay, so common sense, like wisdom that we know we should do. Okay, so there's a good percentage of church that will do that, but that won't pray and won't really actually invite God into their finances. And then you have a good percentage of church that invites God into their finances, and they're praying, like when they get in that situation, broken down car, whatever, it's like, God, I need help. I need a miracle. They're praying for that, but then they're not doing the common sense kind of wisdom. And the power that we discovered is you bring these 2 pieces together. And so it's not all God, it's not all us. but it's that combination, that co-laboring together, where we're doing our part, we're doing as much as we can, but we're, even if it's not enough, even if it's never going to move the needle, we still do what we can do. Jesus feeding the 5,000, like the boy gave what he had. That was never going to be enough, but he gave what he had. Jesus steps in and does the rest. And so that's where the power lies. And that's where things started to shift for us once we started doing that and combining these two pieces together.
I absolutely love that. And there's so many situations I think in my life, even in my current church right now, I can think of people right now that I wish, or not wish, I need to get them to your resources, because there's this faith and works thing, right? There's this wisdom and faith thing that my pastor likes to say it like this, that, wisdom will deliver you from the ditch that your problems get you into, right? So we never fall into the ditch in the first place if we applied our hearts to wisdom, as Psalm 90 says. So my question to you would be, you talked about the practical things, and we've heard them, and there's something very specific I want to get to. I'm kind of jumping ahead, but my ADD brain won't follow a linear path. You and your wife, like you just mentioned, that the whole Chip and Joanna Gaines thing, like you and your wife both had to walk through this. Were you married at the time that you started this journey on moving toward financial independence and financial literacy? Were you married already?
So when the whole car broke down, my kind of turning point, we weren't married yet. We didn't know each other yet. But it was, fun fact, it was like literally just weeks after that I met her. And then a couple years later, we ended up getting married.
Wow. Okay. So you were kind of walking through this as a couple, learning about
at
money.
The beginning.
Yeah. Learning about money. So this is why I noticed something, even as I was reading up on you. And my wife and I, but you might help settle some arguments right now. My wife, by the way, all of my podcasts are really just personal counseling sessions. If you didn't notice this, I get to get free advice, and then people are like, "Oh, it's a podcast." No, actually, I just wanted to ask you questions. So I saw something in where you talked about managing your money, and this is where the practical comes in terms of something as simple as bank accounts, right? Mm-hmm. And I know a lot of gurus that have taught, Christian gurus that have taught, you are one. Your money is all in one pot. Now, I saw something where you advocate something slightly different. Can you explain that, how you and your wife come together and manage this? So again, so that you have the faith, you pray about it clearly together, but you also have some specific skills or strategies, I guess. Can you allude to that a little bit and just explain like how you guys actually manage this on a day-to-day as a couple?
Yeah. So are you talking about the separate spending money kind of account?
I didn't want to give it away, but that caught my attention.
All right. So, so we're in agreement with being one with a marriage. Like I'm an advocate of merging your finances. I think that, in my opinion, I think that's the best and healthiest thing to do. But that said, one thing that I think is incredibly powerful and important is for each spouse to have their own spending money that is no guilt money that they can spend on anything that they want. Without getting permission from the other person, without feeling guilted for buying something that the other one thinks is silly, because we all have that, and most of us with our spouses are like, you want to spend $100 on that? Like, that's insane, so it's such an important thing. And so for us, that was just in our budget. We just created two separate accounts within our budget. Now, we both have access to them. They're both joint accounts. And so she can see what I'm spending money on. It's not for me to hide, my spending or anything like that, but she can't tell me, no, you can't go to Lowe's and buy a fourth saw, and I can't tell her, no, you can't buy your 35th Starbucks of the month. Like we each have that money that we can spend without guilt. And that was a game changer for us, because before we did that, like we would always be asking each other for permission, or maybe even hiding what we're spending from the other one so they didn't see and we didn't feel guilty, because we knew, like all of that stuff has been removed because we created those accounts. And so it's a big deal, really powerful hack.
Okay, number one, you've helped my marriage, because I'm coming up, we'll celebrate 25 years. Yeah. I have always struggled with that. My wife right now, I'm pointing behind you if you're on the audio. Backing that up, all the bedroom furniture, I have no idea where it came from. I have no idea how she got the money for it. And I'm in my head, and I want to be very clear about it. I want to make sure I bring this back to why this is so important to us, both as creatives and as people of faith, as Christians. I believe in my heart that I'm supposed to, the two become one, that we are one in terms of our financial gains, and my goals should be her goals, and our success is our success, right? Her success, my success. So all these things are one. And yet, like you just explained so well, I don't need to lord it over her every single time she wants to get something that actually benefits our life. I trust her, like like Proverbs 31 says, right? My heart trusts in my wife for the money management. And I don't know if we went into marriage as much, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody's listening realizes what you're saying is you can get to where you got to, giving away $1 million by age 40, by following certain principles that may not be exactly the same as everybody, but it works for your marriage, it works for your situation. So I just want to make sure that I'm saying that right, that you're advocating for clearly being united in faith, being united in the way that you approach money, but not being I guess I hate to use the word slave, but being in bondage to a mentality that we have to do it a certain way if it doesn't work for your household or your marriage.
Yeah, and I think that fundamentally the way that we approach money and the way that we're teaching in our classes and everything is we believe personal finance is personal and that there's no one size fits all thing. And I'm all for like, creating a framework to kind of help navigate people. But at the end of the day, like a super strong, rigid thing that you're trying to just force on everyone, like it just doesn't work. Like we're all different. Everyone's personality is different. Everyone's situation is different. Everyone's call and purpose on the earth is different. And so therefore managing money might look different for each one of us. And it's like, and I'll do my best to share things that have worked really well for us and, pray and decide if it works, well for you. But like, that's kind of how we approach things.
I love that. And that's kind of why I did gravitate to, because I felt there's a lot of freedom and grace in your approach to money management, which again, can come off very rigid, right? It can come off, like you said, like, if you have a certain attitude toward debt, or you have a certain attitude toward like the way you manage money with your finance, with your wife or with your spouse, that can be a deal breaker. And again, I didn't want to go so far into marriage. Clearly, this is on my heart, but this is where like a lot of people lose their sense of, hey, how do I get there? So let's talk about the highs. Let's talk about some of the mountaintops, some of the valleys we just mentioned. Your car breaking down. Yeah. Where was the moment that you realized, hey, God is not only working with us, but we have something that we can share? Like, what was the moment that something clicked? Was it, a certain amount you gave away? Was it a certain check? Yeah. Was it a certain, like, what was the moment that you really had confirmation from God that you were on the right path with your money?
I mean, there've been a good number of mountaintop moments. I'll take you through one now. So when I was 31, so I'm 41 right now. When I was 31, we had paid off all of our credit cards at that point because we both brought a lot of credit card debt into the marriage. We had paid off our car loans. We had no more car loans, and we had paid off my student loan. And we were on top of the world, and God had just done cool miracles just to get us to that point that we had all that debt paid off. The only thing we had remaining was our mortgage. And so we were tickled pink, but like I was in go mode after all that. Like my momentum was so strong, and I'm like, let's get this house paid off. Like I wanted to get our house paid off so bad. And I remember going to God and saying, God, I really help us get this house paid off. Because I'm a numbers nerd, and I had the plan in place, and it was going to be about three or 4 years based on us dumping all the extra money that we had towards the mortgage, and we'd have the house paid off in 3 or 4 years, which is fantastic. And most people listening are probably like, that's amazing, and it was, but I wanted it faster. I'm like a typical American, And so I remember going to pray. There was this field near our house, and I went up to this field, and all secluded, and I was praying there. And God, I really would love to help us get this house paid off faster. And I will never forget what I felt like he said to me that up there. He said, if you really want to see me move on your finances, I want you to begin giving your age as a percentage of your income. And I remember stopping in my tracks and like doing what, 31%? You know what? I'm giving 10 now. You want me to basically triple my giving? And, and then I'm like doing the math in my head. I'm like, I don't even know if we can do that. I don't know if we'll be able to pay the bills. Like, I'm arguing with God and all this stuff. And I never felt like God was like, you have to do this or else, or I'm going to get you, or, it was like an invitation to go out on an adventure with him. And yeah, and all the emotions are going all these different directions. And there's part of me that's kind of like a little bit annoyed because I'm like, I just came to you asking you to help me get this thing paid off, and now you're telling me to give her money away. And so anyway, all these different emotions and all this. But I go back to the house and I talk to Linda, and she's amazing, and she got on board like quickly with this crazy idea. And she said, you know what? If God's calling us to do this, there's probably something really cool on the other side of this act of obedience, I'm like, yes, you're right. So anyway, so that month we started giving 31% of our income. And I redid all the math and I realized, all right, well, I'm laying down my goal of paying off this house, God, because now we're giving away all of our money that we were paying towards the house. And now we're giving it all away. So I like laid that thing at the altar and said, all right, you can have it, God. Like, no idea what's going to happen here. But what was so amazing is 10 months later, not 10 years, but 10 months later, our mortgage was paid off. And it was just absolutely bonkers. And I remember like just thinking like, how did this happen? Like what has happened here? And so it was just such an amazing testament to God's faithfulness and the power of obeying him in things when they don't make sense.
Unbelievable. And hearing you tell the story, I mean, the biblical reference immediately comes. We're recording this, if you're here listening at any time, we're recording this when there's all kinds of talk about famine and recession, right? I mentioned famine because the idea that came to mind is Isaac digging wells in the middle of a famine. And so you, at that giving season, were thinking, okay, you were just coming off a high, and you just mentioned it, but now you felt like you went right back into the desert because you don't get to enjoy the overflow, and yet God blessed you so immensely. I got to ask you, even though you just mentioned it, like you don't know how it happened in 10 months, how that happens, but there had to be some wisdom. You just mentioned it. You had the faith to give and be generous, and yet you had the wisdom to apply the principles as you saw the increase. Because I think a lot of us, if we had seen the increase, we might have been a little bit foolish. Oh, everything's fine now. So tell me how you navigated through the success and seeing God bless you through that season of now paying off your house. And then clearly you continued being generous, but not just generous with your money, but also generous with the information. So how did you navigate that moving forward?
Yeah. So yeah, in that particular instance, like I don't know exactly what happened. Like it was a loaves and fishes thing where it just seemed like money was just coming from different places. Like our business was certainly doing better. And so we were having some bigger revenue months, but it wasn't just that. Like there were just a lot of pieces that came in. But for me at that point, like my goal so strongly was to pay off our house. And so as it came in, it's like all of that extra money was just earmarked for that. And especially since at that point we were giving 31% of our income, like I felt very, very comfortable with the amount that we were giving in terms of comfortable taking our excess and putting it towards our mortgage, if that makes sense. And so, so throughout, and I think after we reached that point and paid off the mortgage, like anybody knows that just frees up more room because now you just remove, I don't know what our mortgage was at that point, $1,500 or $2,000 a month. Like now we cut that expense out. So there's even more money each month. And so it's such a powerful thing. And I think it's so beautiful about paying off debt is you decrease your cost of living. Like every single debt you get paid off. And so you can survive on less and have you get more disposable income, to do something with that's important to you, So there's always been a wisdom component that's been necessary. The fact is that we all need it. Like, even if, somebody listens living paycheck to paycheck, like you still need that same wisdom. And it might feel like, well, I don't have anywhere to put it, but you still need that wisdom to apply what you have to make sure that you're putting it in the right place and to make sure maybe there is a way to turn a knob and to actually free up a little bit. And, so that wisdom is required, but especially when there's an increase, because it's easy to do dumb stuff with money, right? It's really, really easy. It's never been easier to just do really dumb things with money. But as believers, I think when we understand that money is a tool that we can use to advance His kingdom, to impact the world, and when we see it through that lens, and we see that money management can be an act of worship, it's an empowering thing that points us in the right direction. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the fact that you once again said, okay, if all this is happening and we're having all these bills paid off, there's a purpose. So the purpose was to be debt free so that you could do this next thing. And since we're talking to creatives and musicians and artists, I sometimes feel that whether we're looking for fame, whether we're looking for, the YouTube subscribers or whatever the platform. I heard actually someone in my church said it very well. She's like, sometimes I think people are praying to have the testimony just so they can use the testimony. So it's like, I want to have this moment of paying off my house just so I can get on YouTube and brag about losing, paying off my house. And it's like, that's kind of not what God wants for you. Like, he's not just looking to bless you with this amazing thing of showing the power of generosity just so that you can, I mean, yes, you'd be bragging on God in a sense, right? But in a sense, it's not really. Like, you had a purpose for this beyond just the financial. I think that's what I'm getting at. And I'm kind of like asking, in a sense, now that you do have a platform, now that you have written a book, like, what does your generosity look like now? What would you say to someone that says, okay, once you've reached this pinnacle, what do you give now? How do I remain generous? How do I give back? How do you now give back and use the same principle in your life today?
Yeah. So one of the things that I've found to be really, really helpful, because we reached a point in our business somewhere around that whole point of given our age. And this is why God's so smart. We reached a point with our business somewhere in there where we had more coming in than we needed. And it was like the first time in my life where I felt like there was extra. And what that meant for me, what that equated to me, was really that I wasn't telling myself no anymore. And so, and not in terms of, all right, I'm going to buy 5 Lamborghinis or whatever, but more like every time I had a thought of whatever, a new Apple product or something on Amazon, like I never had to say, oh, well, I need to wait and save some money for that. It was just always yes, 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 yes. And the problem with that is if you're never telling yourself no, or if you don't have any walls to bump up to, if you have nothing to submit to or yield to, like you just start getting weird really fast.
Yeah.
And that was kind of what was happening. But what was so smart about God, because it's like, I don't think God calls everyone to give their age as a percentage, but that is something he called us to do. And what's so smart about it is he knew that that was just like the perfect amount of tension that we needed, at least in this phase of our lives. So we've continued to do that the last 10 years. And so now we're at 41%. And that amount of tension of giving that percentage has kept us in a good spot to where our needs are still met. Like, we're still very blessed. I'm incredibly thankful for how blessed we are in so many different ways. But at the same time, I can't just buy everything I want all the time. We still have to trust God financially. Like, we're not in this position where we just don't have to trust God anymore. Because I think that's, truth be told, for me, and honestly, I think a lot of people are like, yeah, I just want to make enough money that I don't have to trust God anymore, And the problem is that I don't think that's what God wants. And I think if that's our desire, secretly or not, I think out of his loving compassion for us, he's not going to let us get to that point, because that's a dangerous, dangerous point to get. So all that to say, in our story, in our situation, that whole thing of giving our age as a percentage has just created just the right amount of balance of where we're giving a big chunk, but our needs are still being met, but we're still in this position of trusting God. It's just been a healthy balance for us.
That's beautiful. And it goes right back to how specific God is with each individual person. The verse that keeps popping in the mind that to it, he gives to each one of us grace, a measure of grace, right? So there's a measure of giving, a measure of generosity that he's given to you that keeps your family, keeps money from becoming that big, that big letter G versus the, any kind of being a tool, becoming an idol, becoming where that love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, right? So you clearly, been in touch with God. I want to ask you now about your creative side, because you are as an author, you are now, balancing out, like, you're on podcasts, you're creating books, you're out here as a business person. So I want you to talk to somebody that may be at this starting level, and they may say, okay, well, I want to give, I'm going to trust God, but I will be very specific. I'm going to give you another coaching situation that I'm dealing with a friend of mine who's a beginning fashion designer. And he's asking me, hey, I don't know if I should take out a business loan. I feel like God's going to bless this, but I don't know. And I'm just at that point where I don't even know whether I trust God to just give me the money, or whether I should go out on a loan, or whether the side hustle that I'm doing is really worth it at all. And he is someone, again, that is trusting God, but I feel like he's at that moment where you might have been at, where it's okay, I want to build something, but how do I build it? How do I even get it started? So what would your advice be to people who are at that stage where they want to start a business, they want to be in a position where they're helping people like you are, but they don't know where the provision is going to come from?
Yeah. So, uh, we never took a single loan for our business. And I'm saying that not as in this is everyone's path, but I'm saying that I'm thankful that we didn't. Um, like we built everything from the ground up. We bootstrapped for everything. And it's never been easier to do that, I should say. And certainly there are types of businesses where it's like, yeah, that just might not be possible. And it's like, and I'm not going to say what that is for everybody, but I will say that was our journey. Now, and the other thing I will add here too is that fashion designer, musician, whatever author, like any whatever new digital media thing of any sort, there's so much opportunity to get started without spending any money. So take the fashion designer, for instance, like even if you're not sure about taking out the loan, like don't wait to get started until you can get the loan. Use social media, start building a platform. Even if you can't design your own clothes because you don't have a sewing machine or whatever yet, like start curating. Go into Nordstrom and just start taking pictures of things that you like and start building a following around your curation and your style. And there's so many ways to get started for free. Start building an audience, because that is the most important thing. Like having a group of people that you can take what you've created and share it with them who are interested in what you're doing. And so whether that's TikTok or Instagram or whatever, it doesn't really matter. But the point is, like, start there. Like, do not wait to start. Do that ASAP. And then if you're like, all right, I feel like I might need to take a loan to get this business started. Yeah, pray about that. See if that's the thing that makes most sense. But I think a lot of times people underestimate the power of just getting started for free on one of these platforms and just starting to build an audience. Like find ways to communicate with the people that you want to create for, and it's never been easier to start something like that.
Thank you. Such great advice. And I appreciate it because, again, this is where I think a lot of people hit that kind of wall between their faith when they say, okay, I am giving. And the reason I brought up this one particular situation, because it's a perfect example of a person that says, yeah, I'm giving, I'm tithing, I committed to tithing, and I don't see it yet, right? And your whole company and your platform is seed time, right? So you are very familiar with the idea of a seed going into the ground, but it doesn't necessarily grow. Now, yours grew in 10 months, but you also increased your seed from 10 to 30. So you increase exponentially your amount of seed, and your harvest came back exponentially. So maybe somebody else, their seed might be just 10 minutes on YouTube, or 10 minutes of this particular business idea, or 10 minutes or 20 minutes or $10 or a Facebook ad or whatever it is, but it's planting the seed that gets them started. And I think I hear it loud and clear. Your message is not to wait, that God can be like with Moses. What's in your hand? Like, if you start now, start with the seed that's in your hand, whether it be financial or time or passion, and you give it back to God. Like, who knows when the harvest is going to come, but the harvest is going to come.
Yeah. I mean, along these lines, like, so I am a backyard gardener. I've been a gardener for many, many years. It's funny sometimes, they hear our brand is Seed Time and they're like, oh, you a farming company? Or like, no, we talk about money, but anyway, I've learned so many lessons from the garden. And this year I began planting some hot peppers, which I don't normally grow peppers. I normally grow tomatoes and zucchini and whatever, potatoes and stuff, but decided to grow some hot peppers this year. And anybody who's ever planted seeds, that you plant a squash seed in the ground and it'll be like 2 days and you'll see a leaf sticking up. Like they grow so fast, but hot peppers, a couple of the varieties we planted, like I planted these seeds in little seedlings things, had them all watered and had them on a heat map, to kind of warm them up to the temperature they needed, like doing everything I'm supposed to do to get those seeds to germinate. And 3 weeks later, nothing, like not a single thing. And it's like, and I think it got to the point where it was like 4 weeks and I ended up throwing them away because I'm like, it's just the seeds are bad. Like it's just not working. And then I talked to a gardener friend of mine. He's like, oh, depending on what type of pepper plant it is, like some of them take like up to 6 weeks to germinate. I'm like, what? Are you serious? So my point in all of this is there are things that we do sometimes. I mean, you mentioned that quick turnaround that we had to pay off our house when we gave up, so that has happened, but there's been other things where it's like many, many years. And so you never know how and why, the way that God does it and what the turnaround looks like and what the blessing looks like, and sometimes it's not even financial. Sometimes he does it another way that's even better and more significant and purposeful than financial. But the point is that different seeds take different amount of time to sprout. And so don't be looking at what someone else did and how quick that turned around, and just do what you're supposed to do and just trust God.
Oh, so good. I'm so glad you put that in there because, yeah, I am not a gardener. I am in charge of my houseplants. And I have a one orchid that I'm pretty good at, but that orchid, it clearly has seasons. And when those blooms die away, it can be tempting to throw away the plant, but it's seasonal. And those blooms are coming back and those roots are still in there. And as long as I keep it moist and keep it ready for that time when the season pops up, I'm going to get new blooms in the next season. And it's so important to we realize that God used seeds and our natural world to show us the heavenly realities, right? The fact that everything is a season, that God does work in seasons. There is winter and spring and fall in the in our spiritual lives. Even there's winter seasons in our spiritual life where things drop down and it feels like everything's winter and desert, like Jesus in the wilderness. And then there's summer times where we get to enjoy and see where God is really giving us that harvest. So I want to ask you, with you have so much information. I know we can't dig into everything in just one interview, but if there was one principle from your books or from your teachings that you would want to make sure a new person to your platform gets about your system, about what you share, like what would you lead with? Because I know you can't get it all in one discussion, right? But what would be like your overarching message to someone to say, hey, if you follow me, do not miss this principle about what we found about giving, about money, and about finance.
Yeah, so my wife and I go to a church in Nashville. So, as you would expect, we have a lot of creatives, a lot of musicians there, a lot of industry folks, touring musicians, all that stuff. And so, we've taught a few financial classes at our church. And one of the things that I've come to realize, because I've been in the financial world around financial nerds for a long time, and all of us do this. But what I realized is a lot of people don't do this one particular thing I'm about to talk about, that I think is one of the most important things that we can do now, especially given the inflation, especially given the impending recession and all this stuff, is to actually pay attention to where your money is going. There are far too many people. If you're not doing this and you're listening to it, please, please, please just start doing this. Okay. So, as an example, if you ever go to a nutritionist, and if you've ever done this, like I've done this, and they're like, I want you to create a food journal and start writing down every single thing that you eat. When you do that, you instantly start eating better. You don't have to try to eat better. You just eat better because you're paying attention to it. And so there's actually a law about this. It's called Pearson's Law. And it says when performance is measured, performance improves. When performance is measured, it improves. And so there's something about just measuring or paying attention to what we're actually doing that causes us to improve. And so this is 100% applicable to our financial lives. If you are just spending your money every month, not really paying attention to where it's going, and it's like the end of the month, it's like, yeah, I don't really feel like having more money left. And it's like one of those type of things, like you are kind of harming yourself, and you're missing out on so much more money that you could have available to you just because you're not paying attention. So I'm often recommending using a tool like Personal Capital or Mint.com. You can go in there, hook up your bank account and or your credit cards, whatever. And in about 5 or 10 minutes, you can have a detailed report showing exactly where you've spent your money for the last 3 months. So you can go in there and see exactly how much you've spent on groceries, you know. And the funny thing about this is so many people are just wrong in what they estimate. It's like, yeah, I think I probably spend $500 on groceries, and you'll go check and be like 800 for the last 3 months. You're like, whoa, you know. So it's really powerful because you can't fix the trouble spots when you don't know that they're there. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And it's so, I love the fact that you're talking about that again. Every time you mention a verse pops up, and I just thought about the verse counting the cost. Like checking, you can't finish the tower if you don't know how much you have to build it. Of course, Jesus was talking about, spiritual principle, but it applies here as well. If you want to get out of debt, if you want to pay off your house, how do you pay off your house without knowing how much is going out of your income and out of your outgo? It's a simple process, but it's also so important that you're right. People don't actually do it. I'll point the finger at myself. I'm always the first person to say chief of sinners. Having apps on my phone that say you should be updating your transactions, and it's been 6 months. So I love the fact that it does come down to personal responsibility over what God has given us, the finances, the ideas. You mentioned the creatives and the musicians. Unfortunately, there's oftentimes this correlation that, musicians and creatives and artists, we don't care about money. We don't pay attention to the details. And then we get slapped by the IRS like 20 years later. Like, I don't want that to be the testimony for anybody in my audience, that we can do things in order, have our money in order, have that blessing from giving. That's a huge one that I don't want to gloss over. That the key of your success has been generosity. If I could be so bold to say that's what I see, that God blessed your ability to see his hand, trusting him for your finances, and then walking through the steps and the wisdom and the investments and everything else. But it started with trusting God and giving him access to your life. And then
Yep.
all the other things were added onto that.
Amen. That's true. So true.
I love it. Thank you so much. This has been an amazing conversation, Bob. I don't want to keep you too long, but before you leave, please let us know, those who want to buy your book, those who want to follow your classes, follow you on YouTube, how do they do so? How do they stay in contact with you so that you can get more wisdom to them?
Yeah. So our book is a great starting point. It's called Simple Money, Rich Life. And basically what we do in that book is we help people earn more money so they have more money. We help them reduce their expenses by being a little more strategic, smarter about it, and really just simplifying the process so that you don't have to spend as much time on it. Like, we really try to help you save time managing your money rather than adding time to it. And then the third part is helping you have more fun giving than you ever thought possible. Because I hated giving for so long, and now it's one of our favorite things we get to do. And we have a lot of strategies, like practical ways on how to actually learn to love giving. And then the fourth part is to enjoy it all, because I believe that we can enjoy our earning our money, we can enjoy saving money, we can enjoy giving money, and enjoy spending money. And so that's kind of our goal, and that's where we want to, that's how we're helping people. And so that's kind of great first step. After that, we have courses, online courses on budgeting, investing, and just general money management, just on our website, seedtime.com. And then we're on Instagram at seedtime, podcast, seedtime money, all the stuff.
Well, I am absolutely going to become a regular subscriber, a regular fan of
Yeah.
all your stuff. Again, I told everybody, I started, don't, you have to be careful. You will go down the rabbit hole, you will binge Bob's stuff for a couple of hours and then realize the time is gone. But you'll be so much smarter, wiser.
Better than Netflix.
You'll be much better than Netflix. Netflix is one of those things that's taking the money away. That's one of those things I want to X out because they keep raising it every year, but that's a whole nother story. All right. So, Bob, thank you so much for sharing with the God and Gig Show. Again, this has been a blessing to talk to someone that has walked the talk, who really obviously knows God is moving in his life, and you've been willing to step out and share as a platform builder, as an author, as a creative, in your own right. Again, I don't want to leave that out. Some people say, oh, he's a financial guy. No, you're a creative because God has given you a creative spirit, and you've written the words down, and you're showing up every day to help more people to live the life that God imagined for them. So thank you so much for sharing with us today.